I want to go ahead and break the ice. I want to ask Wal what he thinks about the outburst on 67P recently.
I think that's beautiful.
It's
the very kind of thing that I predicted would happen with the Comet Tempel 1 impact, that there would be a sudden change in the outburst. It wouldn't be gradual, it would just be like switching something on and off. And of course, this is what we've seen with this jet.
Certainly was. Tremendous, and also the organic matter or material that they've claimed to have noticed.
Yeah.
They noticed a large increase in the organic after that burst too, I read.
Yeah. I think the other thing is too, when you look at the jet, how beautifully collimated it is. Now, to produce a jet like that, physically, if it's just compressed material leaving from underneath the surface, you would require a very finely machined venturi. And of course, you don't need that if it's an electrical discharge. Anyway, I think it's still got a few days to go before it reaches perihelion, and so we can expect to see some more activity like this. And if it repeats in the same fashion, then I think that every time it does so, that just adds to the strength of the electrical argument.
I would agree.
Yeah, you're working on a book too, is that correct, Wal?
Sorry?
Are you working on a book or a new paper on gravity?
Oh. Yeah,
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I've written a chapter for a general audience, which is in the hands of Tom Finley at present. The aim there is a German publisher wants to translate Tom's book, plus they wanted a chapter from me, so I thought I'd do it on gravity.
Oh,
so that, I don't know what the status is at present. We haven't heard back from the publisher in the last month or so, but he was having it all translated. But since then, we've had translators pop up from one in Switzerland who wants to do some of our stuff in German, and another one, a French lady who does technical French translations, and she's offered her services. So this is very good, because the more we can reach a general audience in other countries, I think one country or another will see the virtue in being able to do an end run around Western science. If we don't have the wit here in Australia or in the US or the UK, then somebody else is going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I'm watching this Persian division develop, and I'm just amazed at watching these guys take off with the material,
yes,
translated into the different languages for all those regions, and yeah, just to see the whole thing growing like this, it's amazing.
Yeah, I have had this feeling in the back of my mind that it would be a country that doesn't have any strong adherence to Western science mythology that would see the benefits without just dismissing it out of hand because it doesn't fit their beliefs. And that is the danger, of course, for Western science, that somebody will realize the benefits before anyone does in power in Western society.
Yeah, good point. We were talking a little bit earlier before you came on the call about the neutrino and the possibility that it contains all the information needed for life.
Yep.
Chris, did you have a question? I know I cut you off right before we started the call. You were talking about the neutrino. Did you want to say something?
You put me on the spot, Trevor, but my thoughts were is that we're discussing neutrinos and the energy and the communication within the electromagnetic spectrum of DNA structure, and we were bringing up Dr. Sheldrake's work as well, and morphogenic fields, and how it connects to neutrinos, perhaps at a biological level, if all structure, if all life is formed by frequencies within those neutrinos. Billy had mentioned that body scanners were being used, and in fact that human body emits neutrinos or terahertz frequencies. You might want to elaborate on that, Billy. But that's generally what I'm like that to know is it possible that that is the basic structure by which all communications occurs in the ether?
Yeah, my view is that the ether is really a kind of structured neutrino plenum or sea, and it more or less attaches itself also to Jerry Pollack's work on structured water. Now, a water molecule is a polarized molecule, fairly lightweight, and what Jerry has done is shown that it can transmit information throughout the cell about structures within the cell, which gives you some idea of how molecules can find, if they're going to act like a key in a lock somewhere in the biological system, they have to know where to find the lock. Well, it seems that water is the means of transmitting that information throughout the cell. Now, I look upon the neutrinos, which also must be polarizable, electrically polarizable, to be able to transmit electromagnetic radiation. They maybe can form similar information structures. And there's been work done by another Australian scientist whose name I haven't got in front of me at present, but unfortunately he died just a year or two ago. Otherwise I'd be inviting him to our conferences. But he's come to the same view that surrounding a living creature, there is a kind of matrix of information. It's you hear natural therapists talk about subtle energies and fields surrounding the body. Well, his research pointed to the fact that this actually exists, and I've heard this from other people too, other people who work in the natural therapies. In fact, I've got several people in my family who are natural therapists, so I have a considerable interest in the application of physics to the natural therapies. And just as in astronomy and standard physics, biology is also suffering from gaping holes in knowledge right at the very foundations. Biologists have no idea what the distinction is between a bunch of chemicals and life. And the difference appears to be this: you need this matrix of information to be able to structure the molecules in a way which allows them to function as a living organism, but at the same time also to act as a substrate through which information can be transferred in real time. No speed of light delay, no transit time down nerve delay, and no chemical signal in the bloodstream delay. If you're going to control all of the trillions upon trillions of chemical reactions that are taking place in a living system per second, the communication system has to be operating far faster than the speed of light. That's just my view. And I think it brings again this idea of repeated patterns in the universe, where in living systems and that we have structured water as the transmission system, and in the universe at large we also have structured dipole structures in the ether, which also transmit that information. If you think about it, the planets orbiting the sun rely on a structured ether. The ether, the dipoles between the Earth and the sun, which constitute the gravitational effect, operate instantly. In other words, we're connected by a daisy chain of dipoles between the Earth and the sun. And that seems to me to be comparable to Jerry Pollack's structured water, only here we have structured neutrinos, a structured ether. And I'm not the only one who's come up with similar ideas of some kind of structure in the ether. But I think this all sort of fits together in a very simple way. And that's always what I'm looking for, is the most simple answer to these problems.
Yeah, I think the work that's been done at Purdue here in the last few years supports this theory as well, with their patent to the early solar prediction system they're trying to put in place, where they're detecting the changes in, I believe it's PU 232 or magnesium Magnesium 54, I believe it was, they were looking at the isotope changes 36 hours prior to a solar flare.
Yes. In other words, all the matter in the Earth is in touch with what's going on not only on the Sun, but in the Sun in real time. Because as we know, neutrinos are not deflected or modified much by the matter that surrounds them or through which they're travelling.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too there is that at present the theory of radioactive decay is an effect without a cause. And it's always seemed to me that a neutrino is the ideal cause for upsetting a nucleus to the point where it tips over from a metastable state to decay. And a neutrino could do that. So certainly activity transmitted through neutrinos from the Sun could have some kind of resonance effect in radioactive elements on Earth, which could change their decay rate.
Yeah.
Along that same line of topic on neutrinos, Wal, been looking into astrophysical maser outflow jets and trying to correlate that to Berkman current emissions. And that's the only thing I can consider is that it's possibly the coherent core structure of a Berkman current that creates that compression that causes the maser outflow jet. I know there's one on the Earth. We know there's one on the Sun as well, and a number of the other planetary bodies and most all celestial bodies. And the emission of neutrinos, that what I've read was 2,900 trillion electron volts. That's an awful lot of energy. Is there any other phenomena in the universe that we can contemplate in the electric universe that would create that type of compression force and ejection force? Somewhat similar to David LaPointe's model for the primer field.
Yeah, well, David LaPointe doesn't understand it, but he's actually demonstrated the repulsive effect of gravity. And the repulsive effect of the plasmoid at the center of a galaxy would be sufficient to generate those sorts of entities, I think. This is the thing. Gravity is a force almost identical in form to the magnetic force. So you will have a positive pole and a negative pole. And so if you manage to get the poles in matter to face one another, the similar poles, they will repel each other just as strongly as they would otherwise attract. So when you get a concentration of mass and energy in the center of a galaxy in the form of a plasmoid, down the central axis of that plasmoid, if you manage to produce neutrons, for instance, which is what happens in a plasmoid when it decays, any neutrons which find themselves in that central axis will, I think, experience an anti-gravity force which pushes them out along the axis. So the ejection is not entirely an electrical discharge phenomenon, I think. There's also an anti-gravity effect. And of course, one of the things that Fontanot discovered was that the matter that's ejected from the centers of galaxies appears to be practically weightless or massless. And this has to do also with the polarization of the matter which is being ejected. And initially it's ejected with a very strong deficiency in electrons, because electrons get trapped in the magnetic field of the plasmoid much longer than the protons do. So the quasars actually have very deficient in polarization. So it's this polarization which creates the apparent mass of the object. And it's the electrons that stream along the jet afterwards which gradually increases the mass of the polarization and the mass. So the object slows down and becomes a companion. All of this is the kind of thing I would have loved to have had the time or the opportunity to spend more time with Fontanot. We actually had lunch together in 2000, but the filmmaker who was making that film, The Cosmology Quest, was there and wanted him to go and meet Fred Hoyle that afternoon. So I didn't really get enough time to talk in detail about how I felt the electric universe would answer a lot of the problems that he had found with present cosmology, and also fit with his findings, which I felt were absolutely essential to accommodate in any cosmology.
Could you briefly tell us, Wal, the problem with the redshift and the standard model interpretation?
Well, the problem is that it's been interpreted merely as a Doppler effect. And Fontanot showed that with his observations, nobody did observations like he did, because he was producing an atlas of all these peculiar objects that were interfering with one another. So what Fontanot also did with his observational research was to show that the quasars were preferentially aligned along the axis of an active galaxy, and that as you went further from the active galaxy core, the redshift decreased. In other words, the object became more normal, if you like, in terms of the surrounding matter. But he found also that this change in redshift wasn't a gradual thing. It occurred in quantum jumps, which of course then means that the nonsense about quantum theory only applying to the subatomic and is not observable at the macro level is nonsense. If it's something that's observed in physics at that level, then it should have some manifestation at different scales. And here we had a very different scale, from the subatomic to the galactic. Now, that immediately meant that any talk about redshift being due to the intervening matter between the active galaxy and the Earth, and the telescopes on Earth, can't be correct. It has to be the fact that the electrons and the protons in the quasar have less mass than they do in the laboratories on Earth. And this is anathema to science, because the physics textbooks gives you the masses of electrons and protons and whatnot in the back of the book, and they're physical constants. But this is one of the other things that we don't seem to be able to learn, is to stop considering the Earth as the centre of the bloody universe. We just assume that the things we measure on Earth are the same throughout the universe, and that's not correct. Anyway, so of course there are arguments against ARP, and the one that I've seen, which tried to go into a lot of detail, was merely one of these statistical efforts at discrediting somebody, because the statistics that were involved do not match the methodology that ARP employed in finding these redshifts and determining that they were quantized. So it was just a hatchet job. I think Fontanot was correct, and that is that the actual mass of the particles in the quasars is different to what we see on Earth, and as a result, the radiations from the atoms within that object, when they're energized, they'll have different orbits, and the orbits will be at lower energies than the ones we see on Earth. So that is in effect a redshift in the spectral lines, and that's all we see. That's the only information we have to go on. The interpretation of the astronomers is faulty, because they haven't done their homework, they haven't examined what ARP showed, and Fontanot has pointed out the problems that they face, and the problems face also the particle physicists. And particle physicists are as much responsible for the waste of money in cosmology as the astronomers themselves. The two of them egg each other on. You can see that with the Higgs boson experiment. That's the most colossal waste of time and money ever. But at the same time, the astronomers are investigating things out there, trying to find dark matter and dark energy and so on, which is a total waste of money. Anyway, that's off the track a bit.
No problem. We do have a young...
Fontanot book, Seeing Red, is the most important book for any astronomer to read and read again until they understand it all. because the questions he raises at the end of that book are precisely the ones that the electric universe is designed to answer.
Very good. We do have a young physicist on the call with us. His name's Will B. Any advice for a young physicist that's looking to become an electrical engineer, possibly?
Well, it's a very difficult thing to answer that question. I get it asked all the time in emails. Really, I think for me, it was an inspiration when I read Velikovsky's work. And where I went with that, of course, was up to me. And this is really the case here for anyone who asks me, is what is it that really turns you on about the things that you've heard? And any of the big questions that come out of it for you are the ones that you should pursue. And this is the sort of thing I'd love to see schools do. The education system, instead of giving kids answers all the time, pose the questions and then give them a couple of leads to look at and let them make up their minds and then discuss it. But don't just give them so-called facts, because most of the facts are rubbish. So in the case of cosmology, I've actually said that the cosmology is in the wrong hands right now. It should be in the hands of electrical engineers. So electrical engineering is a very good start, I think, for the cosmology of the future.
Thanks, Wal. I'm actually at uni at the moment.
Right.
I live in Adelaide. I'm
right.
studying physics at Flinders University, and it's exactly what you say. It's just most of the stuff I get force-fed is just the same old outdated bull-crap paradigms, and we don't get taught how to think. We don't even get allowed to think. It's pretty much just copy off the board into the books. Don't even worry about processing it in your mind, and just repeat it on the test paper at the end of the semester.
Yes.
And we get punished for asking questions, pretty much. Like I've brought up a lot of the EU theory stuff with my professors and stuff. They don't want to hear a bar of it, and tried to have discussions, and it's just dismissed, and I get told off and condescended to, and
it doesn't work. What I found was that if you want to play their game and actually make a success at it, having the electric universe in the back of your mind when you're doing these courses is a great help, because you can see all the problems that the stand theory that you're being taught faces, and it gives you the opportunity in an exam to actually highlight the assumptions. And when you do that, but you don't give any answers, you just highlight the assumptions that were made, and you say, if you assume this, and blah, 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 and you may even mention some of the problems involved in that, you will usually get marked up, because it shows that you've actually done some work. You haven't just read the book you were told to read. So that can actually work in your favour. But it is rather disheartening. That was why I gave up university in my honours year, because I just realised that I was being used, more or less. The research project I was given, you drew straws to see who your advisor would be. And I ended up in a aircraft hangar at Royal Air Force Base at Point Cook, just south of Melbourne, reconstructing a radio telescope dish that was second hand from the CSIRO. And I thought, well, this is rubbish. So I joined IBM instead and got into computing on the ground floor, which was a good thing to do at that time. I'd suggest that you can get a hold of Don Scott's book, The Electric Sky, because he goes in from an electrical engineer's point of view and looks at the sun and the solar cycle in terms of a changing DC current. Also, we've been looking at the circuitry attached to the sun from the galaxy, and it's much more complicated than just like a wire travelling down through one pole and out the other. It actually comes in at both poles and goes out at the equator. And the circuit involves the central axis of a Birkeland current, which is the polar current, if you like, and that's already been demonstrated to exist by the twisting magnetic fields seen above the north and south poles of the sun by the Ulysses spacecraft. When you get into the current sheet at the equator, we can see that connection back to the galaxy in the IBEX results, which showed this ring around the solar system, well beyond the heliosphere. So we've got all the evidence we need, actually, for the Sun being part of the galactic circuit. And when you go beyond the solar system, radio astronomers and that now are able to track connections between us and other stars, it seems. And also the cosmologists themselves have stumbled on the filamentary network that the galaxy, or that the universe seems to be part of. And the very fact that it's all filamentary, of course, is unexplained by gravity. You don't get filaments in gravity, you just get blobs, a central collapse point, a center of mass. Whereas electric currents, you have an axial center of mass, if you like. So...
Yep, on the gravity thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I listened to that conversation you had with Michael. And one of the first things that came to my mind was the ability to predict, earthquake, weather anomalies, and even volcanic activity. Electrical engine, the electric universe will definitely benefit any one of those areas of science.
Oh, sure. It'll be the biggest revolution in both culturally and scientific, I think, in history.
Having an impact on, mankind. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's essential, actually, for our future. Unless we come to grips with our real place in the universe instead of listening to all these myths and legends of science, we won't have a future.